28th to order, and the first item is approval of our agenda.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as put forth. Is there any changes requested? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Next is approval of the minutes of our May 14th Select Board meeting.
Moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any amendments to the minutes as
Aye.
drafted?
I have one.
Yes.
On line 151, the minutes say Sealy said she was surprised at the $54,000 requested for bundle in their funding request. I was actually playing devil's advocate on the entire budget amount and just had been wondering if they sort of had a priority list on. I didn't have any problem with what they had budgeted for the bundle, so I'm not quite sure how to readjust that.
Okay.
Would you?
So I'll work on that with Beth.
Yeah, please. Thank you. I didn't have anything else.
Okay, any other amendments?
No.
Okay, so all in favor of approving the meeting minutes with proposed change, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, next, citizen comments. This is an opportunity to speak about something that's not on the agenda. Go ahead.
I'm Irene Barna, and I am here in defense of the protection of the 1853 pulp mill covered bridge in the event of 2020 when the downtown bridges are closed. And if you'll recall, we couldn't fix those deteriorating bridges until we had the Cross Street Bridge, and that was dedicated in 2010. So we had pulp mill then, but we couldn't use that as the only way to cross. My defense is at this meeting time, and I did send all of you a message with photographs of what is possible, and I have combined with more photographs of a serious, strong structure that I've gotten from Bill Caswell, who happens to be the president of the National Society for the Preservation of Covered Bridges. He furnished me with photographs, and I have given each of you a copy of the fact that there is real estate available on either end of the pulp mill bridge, that includes the Weybridge side, to install those temporary structures. And what they would do if a vehicle tries to get through there, even though if a lot of drivers don't know the size limitation of their trucks, and they'll go through something, and 3 of our state bridges have been damaged severely within the last month. And we don't want that. We can't afford to have that happen to the pulp mill bridge. We need that structure for transportation. Anyway, I did copy those photographs for you so you can see there is real estate available over there to put up these structures. Whether they're not pretty, but neither is the downtown stuff going on right now pretty. But we can't do nothing to protect that bridge. We need them. So in the context of what I've already sent to each of you, I've given you more information, and I'm asking, please consider putting some sort of structures up there in the preservation of that 1853 covered bridge. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Irene. We'll take this under advisement and discuss it prior to closure of the downtown bridges. Are there any other citizen comments?
Yes.
Gary?
Quite a number of people have been asking me, what's happening with the motel down on Route 7? And some of them are pretty antsy about it, too.
So the owner of the Blue Spruce has been in contact with Jen Murray, and he's making slow progress, obviously, but he has done some hazardous material abatement. More is needed. I understand that there have been several private entities that are interested in purchasing the Blue Spruce, which might help move it along more quickly.
There's no drop dead date?
No.
Seems though there should be.
Yeah, I think we would all like it done sooner than later. Whatever,
Jen has been working with the property owner,
Yeah.
as the board asked her to do, and trying to ask him to move forward promptly.
you're welcome. I do think that the cost of cleanup is something the town is not prepared to undertake. It's what came out of some of those discussions, and so. Next is applications for liquor license, outside consumption permits, and entertainment permits. And since, is there anybody here other than Kevin? Since Kevin is here, let's take on the Otter Creek Brewing one first, that Kevin Brown is representing.
Thank you. So we obtained a permit amendment for the conditional use permit from Dave Wetmore earlier in May to extend the closing time from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. for occasional special events. And the outdoor consumption permit actually carries hours as well, has the same hours as the conditional use permit. The interior liquor license does not have hours, but the outdoor consumption permit does. So currently, the outdoor consumption permit has hours from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., which are the hours of the brewery tours. So the idea is that for occasional special events, maybe outdoor music, things like that, Otter Creek wanted to be able to go past 7 p.m. They estimate approximately 10 to 15 events per year, which is what the application before the DRB, or actually the zoning administrator for administrative approval, said. So with that permit having been granted, now we move to have the local liquor license extended to 10 p.m. for special events. The regular business hours of the outdoor consumption area, the patio, would remain the same. So the idea is maybe they'll have some music on Friday nights, those kinds of things, or they've done some special events for the college, different organizations with the college, and they'd like to be able to do that.
So I'll move to approve an amendment to the outside consumption permit for Otter Creek Brewing, expanding consumption hours during special events and parties to 11 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor of supporting the motion, signify by saying aye. 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 Those opposed? Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're
Appreciate
welcome. So I'm going to go back to the others. And there's an application of Middlebury College for a first-class liquor license for the grill at 14 Old Chapel Road. That's to serve beer and wine only for consumption on the premise. The consumption area in the application is described as the grill in the adjoining Wilson Hall on the second floor of the McCullough Student Center, as well as the Crossroads Cafe on the first floor. Chief Hanley and Chief Shaw have completed their public safety inspections and have approved the application. Pleasure of the board.
I'll move to approve the Middlebury College application for a 2019 first-class liquor license for the grill at the McCullough Student Center.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any comments or questions on that? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Next is to consider an application of Middlebury College for a temporary outside consumption permit for the Terrace at Atwater Dining Hall during reunion weekend. The application's for Friday, June 7th during reunion weekend at the college. The consumption area described in the application is limited to the Atwater Commons Dining Terrace and would be defined by natural and fenced barriers and will include checkpoints where needed. Up to 200 people are expected for the event, which would run from 5:30 p.m. to 1 a.m. on Friday, June 7th. The requested hours conform to Middlebury's noise ordinance, which prohibits unreasonably loud noises or disturbances between 1 a.m. and 7 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. Pleasure of board on this request.
I'll move to approve Middlebury College's application for a temporary outside consumption permit for the Terrace at the Atwater Dining Hall for Friday, June 7th during reunion weekend.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any questions, comments on that? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay. And we have application from American Flatbed for an entertainment permit and 2 outside consumption permits. The entertainment permit application. No, the outside consumption permits are in the same attachment. It's for occasional live music, Tuesday through Thursday from 2 to 10 p.m. and Fridays and Saturdays from 2 to 11 p.m. or midnight. Music would sometimes be outside in the area approved for outside consumption if we approve it. These hours conform to the town's noise ordinance. I think we need to, I think we do it in one. So the 2 temporary outside consumption permits are for the June 23rd annual Foodaroo event from 4 to 9 p.m. and for consecutive Thursdays between July 11th and August 29th, also from 4 to 9 p.m. In a May 22nd email to Ann Webster, Chief Hanley stated, "No concerns and I have no opposition to the request."
So I'll make a motion to approve American Flatbread's entertainment permit application and 2 temporary outside consumption permit applications as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Comments on that? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Chief Shaw. I think I saw you here. Evening, Chief. Good.
I'd like the firefighters march around the rotary.
Yeah, we try to change things up a little bit, keep them guessing.
That was nice.
Thank you. So I'm here tonight to seek board approval for the purchase of 7 sets of turnout gear. That would be coats and pants and 2 sets of fire boots. This program falls in line with our continuous program to keep our gear current with the NFPA standard that states turnout gear cannot exceed 10 years of service.
Questions, Chief?
No,
Pleasure of the board.
because it's within our budget.
It
And we're
is.
just coming because.
With the program we set up with the Public Works Committee some time ago,
Right.
yes.
All right, so I'll move that we approve the request from Chief Shaw to purchase the turnout gear from Bergen Protective Clothing at the cost of $14,593.92 under the sole source purchases provision of the town purchasing policy.
Second.
Moved and seconded. And I don't believe there were any questions.
Just
Yes,
one-
comment.
So where are we in the whole schedule? Have we gotten everything
Next year should bring us in line.
next year?
Yeah,
Okay. I think I asked you that every year.
that's okay. I might tell you the same thing every year.
So we're getting there.
We're gaining,
Slowly,
yeah, we are.
surely we're
Yep.
getting there.
Yeah, it took us a long time to
And
follow.
schedule for other equipment too,
Exactly.
Yes.
Yep,
tracking, that you're tracking.
we are.
Okay, so all in favor of approving Chief's request signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Thank you.
Next, we have Peter DeGraff, who's going to walk us through his findings on the options of Creek Road. Evening, Peter.
Good evening. I'd like to start by thanking you for allowing me to reschedule the meeting I previously had scheduled with you for some health reasons, and I also have to apologize that I've got a nasty spring cold, so if my voice starts to crack, that's the reason why. I wanted to start out asking what's the board's preference? Do you want to just dive into questions, or would you like me to walk through the report that you have included in your packet?
We have a number of people here. How about a brief walkthrough of
Sure.
the packet? to
I
start?
did bring some additional copies of the report, if there's anyone in the audience that would like to have a copy. Okay. First of all, just to give a little bit of background, I'm sure everybody's familiar with the problem, the road, and the kind of a little bit of the history, but I wanted to touch base on that initially. Creek Road is approximately 2.6 miles long. Goes from Court Street down to 3 Mile Bridge Road. The northern section of it is about 0.3 miles, and there's quite a few businesses and houses along that section of the road. Fortunately, that section of the road is in good condition. The road turns to gravel just a little bit south of the state highway garage, and from there it only serves two residences, the Binghams and the Parents' house, and farm fields owned by the Goodrich and Knopp farms. The road has experienced fairly significant damage from Otter Creek over the years. I think this has been a historical problem, but it's been particularly problematic in the last 20 years or so. And major repairs were made by the town to the road to address erosion problems in 2008, 2012, and 2015. And then in 2015, the town closed the road from 3 Mile Bridge Road to just south of the Parents' house. Back in, I'm not sure if it was 2015, 2016, the town and regional planning commissioned a study by Pathways Consulting to do a comprehensive review of the road, try to figure out what the problem was, what potential solutions are. Pathways did a pretty comprehensive evaluation of Otter Creek and that stretch of Otter Creek and Creek Road, came up with quite a few different alternatives for both how to repair the road and how to stabilize the embankment. They did a good job in considering the various alternatives and approaches. However, the end product that they came up with, it was difficult to compare the different options and for the town to really make a decision on how to move forward, because the options were significantly different from each other, and there was a lot of factors to take into consideration for each one. So you ended up with a report that I think overall I had probably 12 different approaches to addressing the problem, but it was difficult for the town to move forward with a decision. So that's when I came on board. Kathleen asked me to see if I could kind of sort through the material that's been done today and bring everything down to a more concise level so that you're able to compare some fundamental options and compare them on an apples-to-apples basis instead of apples and oranges and pineapples as they were presented in the other report. My main intent was, as I said, to simplify the options, to come down with the basic items, and to also, excuse me, like I said, the cold's getting the best of me. And to present, that would be great, thank you, Heather. And to also to present the cost analysis. Thank you. I feel very privileged, Kathleen, thank you. Spring colds can be the worst. And to present the cost analysis on a present worth basis, so that you're not only looking at what the capital costs are up front, but also what the long-term maintenance and repair costs of Creek Road are, so that you're seeing the big picture for the road. I talk about that in more detail in the analysis, and I won't get into kind of the formulas and that type of thing here. But a few things that I wanted to point out that are important assumptions in the analysis. First of all, the costs that are included. For consistency, I used basically the same format and a lot of the same unit cost numbers that Pathways used in their analysis. So that this is really a continuation of their work. I've reviewed the quantities that they use. I've reviewed the unit costs that they use, and I feel that those were pretty reasonable numbers as a starting point. There were, however, a few significant variants from pathways analysis that I've added to my cost estimate. First of all, there's a culvert immediately south of where the road is closed that's in poor condition. It's a fairly large box culvert that would need to be replaced if the road were to reopen. Another thing that Pathways didn't incorporate into their report and that I've added at the request of Public Works is the addition of some guardrails along certain sections of the road where it's particularly close to the stream and it's a safety hazard. And then lastly, and probably the most significant, is for Pathways' proposed solutions for stabilizing the embankment of the river. They included a unit cost of $150 per foot to stabilize the embankment. Since Pathways' report was completed, the town bid and may actually be under construction or will be under construction soon, repairs to a similar section of roadway along Shard Villa that has experienced similar problems. And the unit cost for that section of roadway is actually $480 per lineal foot, which makes a pretty dramatic difference in the stabilization costs for the roadway. And then one other thing that I've incorporated into my analysis is the maintenance cost moving forward. If you were to keep the road open, what's the maintenance cost on a gravel road? And I'm carrying $12,000 per mile per year, which is a standard figure that the Department of Public Works uses in their budgeting process. As part of the present worth analysis, you need to define what the evaluation period is, the analysis period, and for this evaluation, I've chosen a 10-year term based on conversations with Dan and Kathleen. That seems like a reasonable period for this analysis, and a 3% rate of return, which is effectively what historical inflation rate has been. You can play around with the rate of return some. Some communities will use the interest cost on long-term debt as a component of it. In this analysis, to keep it simple, I've just used the 3% return. If the town wants a more detailed analysis with other rates of return that take into consideration the interest on long-term debt, I can easily incorporate that into the analysis. And then for the analysis, there was certain minimum upfront improvements that needed to be made under all the scenarios prior to the road being reopened. The southern section reopened and the northern section restabilized. One other variant from Pathways work is they had assumed 700 to 800 feet that had to be repaired. There's current damage to the road and it needs to be repaired. Since the Pathway study was completed, that number, based on site visit with myself and Dan and Bill, that number has increased about 1,300 feet. So in the intervening years between 2015 and now, or late last fall, the total footage of road that's actually damaged has increased quite a bit. In order to do this analysis, I had to make assumptions on how quickly the road would deteriorate in the future, and how much over that 10-year analysis period, how much of the road you're going to have to repair, how much stream embankment you would have issues with. For the purpose of this analysis, and so that we were comparing, again, apples to apples, I basically assumed that anything that's within 25 feet of the stream bank now would need repair in some form over the next 10 years. I think that's a fairly good assumption based on historical view of what the road has done over the past 20 years, what areas have been impacted, it's likely that you'll have some damage in those areas where it's only 25 feet away. And that's also consistent with Pathways study and their subconsultant study that looked at the hydrogeology of the river. So basically, as Pathways study indicated, there's all kind of different kinds of approaches and options for addressing this. When thinking about the end product, from my perspective, it really came down to three basic options with one variation on one of those options. The first option is to open the road back up, do whatever work is necessary to open the road back up. And then my analysis included two variations of that. One, to basically go through and address all the stream bank within 25 feet of the roadway for the entire length. So everything's an upfront capital cost. It would be bonded for, and you do everything up front. The second approach would be to just repair the areas the 1,300 feet that we've identified that need to be repaired in order to open the road up. Replace the box culvert that I mentioned earlier, install the guardrails that I mentioned earlier, and then phase the rest of the repairs out over a 10-year period on an as-needed basis. This is where the present worth analysis comes into play. Because obviously the upfront costs of the first approach are significantly higher than the second approach, but you really need to take into consideration what the long-term costs to the town are going to be. The next alternative would be to basically keep the road closed to the extent that it is now and make repairs from the end of pavement through to the parents' house. And in this analysis, I used a phased approach. Repair what needs to be repaired now, and then over the next 10 years, address the balance of the areas that are potentially going to be impacted. And then the last alternative that I considered, alternative C, was to close the road a little bit farther north, basically just south of the Bingham's driveway, and then construct a new driveway for the parents' house that would go through South Ridge to allow you to abandon the section of road between Bingham's and Parents, which is actually the worst section of Creek Road. That's the section of road that has sustained the most damage and in need of the most work. So all those four different options, I performed a present worth analysis for, and those are summarized in a summary table in your report. To be perfectly frank with you, the numbers were more dramatic than I expected, and the differential between the different options were greater than I expected. Basically, for alternative 1A, which was opening the entire roadway up and doing the large majority of the repairs up front. The present value, present worth of that cost was $4.9 million. Backing up a little bit, in this summary table, I've got the cost basically broken down by upfront capital costs in the first column, annual costs in the second column. Now, annual costs would include annual repairs and also the annual maintenance of the road, the $12,000 per mile per year that I mentioned earlier. Those annual costs are translated into a present worth, added with the capital cost to get the present value. So 1A, with basically making the majority of the repairs up front, $4.9 million. The next one, again, opening the road for its entire length, but only making about $1.5 million in repairs up front, translates to a present value of $4.6 million. Both very expensive projects, obviously. In order to repair the road to Parents, keep it open to Parents, and basically still keep the southern portion of it closed. That translates to a present value of $2.8 million. And then to close the road at Bingham's residence and construct a driveway and for parents. And the annual cost for this item also includes maintenance of that driveway to a certain extent, to be agreed upon between Perrins and Southbridge and the town. But there is some maintenance cost of that driveway in there as well, $671,000. Like I said, I was surprised by the order of magnitude differential between all four of these options. But to me, the numbers really speak for themselves. The backup for each alternative in the summary table is included, the detail is included, and again, you'll see this is in the same basic format as the analysis that Pathways did, so it'll allow you to flip back and forth and see, compare it with some of their alternatives, with the caveat being that they don't take into consideration the longer-term repair and maintenance cost. So that's a quick and brief overview of my analysis. I think I go into a little bit more detail and probably explain it a little bit clearer in my written report. But I guess with that, I'd like to entertain the board's questions.
Okay, before we go to the audience, questions from the select board.
Quick question about the pathways and you between 150 and 480 bucks.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a difference the amount of work you're doing, or is the same kind of work?
I reviewed the design drawings for Shard Villa, and Pathways didn't do final design drawings by any means. It wasn't within their scope. But it's a comparable methodology to what Pathways was proposing.
It's a huge difference in cost, though.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what the basis of their $150 per lineal foot was. I don't know if that's based on actual construction projects or their engineers' estimates of what the construction cost would be. For reference, let me just find the... So, for reference, the Shard Villa bids came in, they ranged from a low of $424 per foot to a high of $883 per foot. For my purposes, I eliminated that high estimate to come up with the average of about $480 that I used in my numbers. For one other supporting piece of information is the repairs that were made in 2015. Slightly different situation, and I wouldn't use that number exclusively, but the 2015 repairs cost about $411 per foot.
Laura?
Are all options assuming public access by foot?
Yes. See, my analysis was strictly intended to look at the roadway and the capital costs associated with the roadway. What happens to the balance of Creek Road? That's a further discussion with the board. I would anticipate the board's going to want to keep that right of way. And what happens with the balance of the road, whether it's maintained, whether it's allowed to go natural, whether it's kept as a footpath or a bike path, that's a future discussion.
Do you have any estimate of, say, what the cost would be of that kind of?
I mean, there's a sound.
That's what Laura.
There's a relatively sound gravel base there. I think it could be used on a regular basis by people safely for a number of years. It really depends on what the river does and how extensively it erodes the road base. But I would anticipate that people will continue using it the way they have now. Upgrading it to bike path standards, to the Agency of Transportation standards, there would obviously be a cost associated with that, but that really wasn't within my scope at this time to look at what those costs would be.
Okay, thank you.
Heather, do you have? One question, when you're doing the estimates for, I think it was 1B. Or A2. And your annual costs, so you're doing the
I'm sorry, you on A2 or?
A2.
A2.
Yeah, and you were doing the same as in A1, but over a period of time. Were you still maintaining your average cost of $480 per lineal foot for work on the bank throughout that 10-year period?
Yes.
So you don't have any factor for inflation in that one? Or?
So and that gets into what percentage to use for your rate of return in your present worth analysis. The 3% takes that into consideration to a certain degree. It includes construction inflation of construction costs. It could be bumped up a little bit higher to take into consideration the capital expense and the
Okay,
cost
so
of-
you did use a 3%, right? Okay.
Peter, when you used the price for the 2015 repair, was that on the north section that,
the section that Markowski did.
yes,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm not completely familiar with that project, but I understand that there was extenuating circumstances there. That's why I said I wouldn't rely exclusively on that number. I put more faith in the bid numbers that the town just received.
And when you calculated the cost for the footage based on the Shardvilla project, you are considering the entire cost of that project, right? You were taking the bid numbers and dividing it by the linear foot. You were not excluding costs that would not be associated with other parts of Creek Road.
Correct.
So-
I looked at the scope of work that was included in the bid price, and I made adjustments as necessary so that it really was bank stabilization, that I was using the bank stabilization component of the cost, yes.
Because there's other costs,
For Creek Road, yes.
no, I would say that the Shardvilla project is much higher cost than doing what needs to be done on Creek Road. So I'm gonna respectfully disagree with using that number to generate these numbers.
Okay.
Just, so I have numbers from 2012 bid, which was similar to the work that had been done there before, that's good, that's maintained. At the time, the road foreman at the time was scheduling a certain percentage of work every year. And I took a look at, that number at the time. If you take the 1,300 and you divided it over 7 years, we would have only had to do like 185 feet a year. And total cost, and that's figuring a 10% increase each year, we would have spent, just under $200,000 to fix 1,300 square feet. So there's a huge difference in, I think the Markowski project in 2015 also doesn't compare well to work that's been done on that road in the past that's held up, that looks fine. So I'm just gonna respectfully disagree with
Okay.
some of those
I'd be
numbers.
happy to go through the numbers that you recited and understand better where the 2012 numbers were based on, and see if those were more applicable in this analysis. For comparison purposes, I also basically did the same analysis using the $150 per lineal foot, significantly less than the Shardvilla numbers that Pathways had carried. And just for comparison purposes, alternative A1 came out at about 2.1 million. Alternative A2 came out at just over 2 million. Alternative B came in at about 1.1 million. And alternative C came in at 445,000. So that gives you order of magnitude how much that unit cost does impact the value. But I think it also reflects the fairly significant difference between the different alternatives.
So in the Pathways report, their proposal for bank stabilization was considerably different than what I considered needed to be done there. They were suggesting a layered terraced material in fabric design with a certain, percentage of riparian buffer, which was considerably different than what, I was thinking could be done for less money. So when you do those numbers, are you using Pathways numbers, like their design, or are you using the bank stabilization, like riprap design?
So the 480 is based on the design, the engineered design that was completed for Shard Villa.
Okay,
So, and that approach is probably more comparable to the approach that Pathways was advocating for than possibly a lesser approach than.
so more of the terraced fabric material. Okay. So I'm still not sure that and Pathways proposal for the driveway or the road to Perrin's, my understanding is their proposal was a public road, a road built to public road standards, but your proposal is suggesting a driveway?
They considered both a private drive and a public road. One of the last alternatives that they considered was actually a public road that went down to basically where Creek Road ends. I didn't really see the purpose of that approach, and I was trying to come up with the most cost-effective alternative that I could, which was just a private drive to Perrin's.
Yeah, so when we talk about so, again, there's a little bit of, I don't know that the town can build a private drive with town funds. So when we looked at the Pathways proposal, the suggestion was a town road, built to town road specs, which is considerably different price-wise. So, so I'm afraid, we look at the numbers for building a private drive, and yeah, it's considerably less, but is that really an option for the town? I don't know. So,
I guess I don't know that it's necessarily precluded that the town can't build a private road if all the appropriate easements are obtained. Given one, the cost benefit of it, and two, the purpose of why you're building it. You're not building it to allow for development to go in there. You're building it to accommodate a property owner who's losing access to their public road.
right, but we have other property owners on that same road that are losing access to their road. Are we gonna build private drives for every single property there?
I'm not proposing that, and I don't know that that's,
Well,
I don't know if that's necessary.
Okay. I would respectfully disagree that if we're going to close the road, then we're preventing every property owner on that road, whether there's residents there or not, access to their property. And if we are going to choose to build a private drive for one, then I think we should consider it for all. And I know in the past, when the town has considered, when developments have been created and the development wants the town to consider taking those roads over after they've been built, that the roads have to be built to town specs. And when they haven't been, because the development wanted to save money at the time, the town has chosen not to take those roads over as town roads because they're not built to town specs. So I just think it's something we should consider when we're looking at the numbers.
Are you saying because we build it, you feel we have an obligation to maintain it?
No, I'm saying that I don't know that I support building a private drive with town funds, unless we're going to do the same thing for all the property owners.
But are we, by necessity, prohibiting them from accessing the properties by what action? We haven't decided whether we're
Right.
shutting down the road completely. I mean, right now, we're not precluding them access to their properties.
Right, but except in this option, we're talking about upgrading the road to Perrin's and closing it, but we don't talk about access, the cost to providing access to all the other property owners. So I feel
You
like
could
there's
s-
still pieces missing
Yeah.
to these options.
You could still leave it the way it is right now. Key access.
I'm just pointing out things that,
Yeah, no, I get it.
you know, with different options that I think pieces are missing.
Where did you, on your design of the, or thought of the driveway, access to the parent property, is that from what direction, or coming in from behind?
I have met with Dan Warner, and I did meet with Charlie Kirker from South Ridge. We discussed two potential alternatives, and Charlie has definitely a preferred one that comes in basically from the north and goes past the solar farms and accesses Perrin's along their northern property line.
And parents are here, and I know when the road floods, they access their property through the fields. They do have a way to, you know, to get from their property to over here. Oh, okay. Drive through the fields. Okay.
Yeah, I think we looked at, it was pointed out when we did our site visit. And Charlie, you've looked at it with them. Is that would that be is that a reasonable option that should be considered? Would you allow access through there for the parent driveway?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't privy, Brian, to any of the antecedent work, nor to other discussions that the select board's had. So Pete and Dan contacted me and said they'd like to come out and evaluate our property, whether it would offer a way to access the parent's property. And I took them out to show them the road that was built to our first solar project, which was built back in 2013, and how we have now an approval that the town supported a year ago, creating a state solar district. We have another solar project about to be built later this calendar year, this summer, and that will fill in between the first one and the southernmost one, which we built 3 years ago. So there'll be 3 solar installations side by side with gravel roads serving each of them, and those could then become the route starting on the paved road that runs by the retirement community and comes up and around and into our neighborhood. There's an access road to the first solar project we built in 2013. That road could then continue on down to the parent property. When Heather mentions other property owners who would not have access if such a road was built, I'm not sure what property owners are you referring to, Heather? South of Bingham's, there are no other houses other than the 2.
So if a property owner doesn't have a house on their property, they're not allowed to
But
access it.
I'm saying, what other property owners are you referring to?
All the farmland, the Goodrich Farm, the Knott Farms, you know, just because there aren't houses there, those are working.
There's the Knox own land to the north of Perrin, but between our property and Perrin, that's the only property I'm aware of that's not being accessed if there's a driveway to Perrin by the closure of the current Creek Road.
So, I'm sorry, I'm not, so there's,
Between the Perrin's property and the property of Middle Road Ventures, there's only one farmer that owns land, and that's conserved land with the Middlebury Area Land Trust, and I believe it's the Knox. So you said other property owners, plural, like there are multiple properties. South of Perrin, there are other properties, but those are already closed off.
yes, but they have access to it with the existing road.
The existing road has gates,
Yes, and they have keys to the gate.
which you could, I'm looking at that.
So my concern is, you know, that the road is left to the river and, you know, just because there aren't houses there doesn't mean that those property owners don't have the right to access that property. and,
I'm not
work their
arguing that point.
fields.
I'm just trying to understand the comment you made when I was asked about Mill Road's lands. Now I'm trying to understand yours.
One consideration, I hear you, I hear what you're saying, Heather. One consideration is the town would need to make a decision on whether they need access along that entire length of road, or whether they just need access to entry into their property from Creek Road or some version of Creek Road. Because that makes a difference in how much of the road may need to get upgraded or may need to get maintained if the town chooses to do that. Because quite a bit could be accessed from north and the south without maintaining the whole road along the entire length.
So I know there's a lot of people who came here to see this presentation. Open to the floor for comments or questions at this point.
I'm interested in that road because I use it to walk on along with a lot of other people. I was telling them why out there when there isn't someone else walking on that place, the piece that's closed. It's wonderful to not have traffic, and it's also a place you don't walk where there are any ticks, because there's no trees, I love to walk in the woods, but I come home from the woods and I'm just covered with ticks, and I'd love to be able to go out there and no ticks and no traffic, and it's, a lot of people use it for exercise and bicycling as well.
Well, I'd like to respond to that. I've used that road and traveled on it for over 60 years, except for the last few years it was closed. So, you can walk on it, you can drive on it. I don't get it.
Except when it's flooded.
Huh?
Except when it's
Well,
flooded.
you can't walk on it. It's flooded.
Well, that's right, that's right. Put it on my boots.
My concern is if we're fixing the road, if we're fixing Creek Road, which is fine, can we make it so that we have help and fire department access year-round? Because what happens, if our barn catches on fire when we're flooded? There's not access to the field to get a vehicle there, or an ambulance, or anything of that sort. So if we're gonna upgrade Creek Road, then can we upgrade it, raise it, do whatever needs to be done so we are not flooding and we can get medical or emergency vehicles?
That's gonna be a job.
Right, but when we bought it, we understood that it flooded and stuff, and so that's something we lived with, because that was the existing road. But if we're gonna be making repairs, then shouldn't that be something to take into consideration?
I would answer, except for I need to think about that.
That's okay, I just wanted to put it out there.
That's the section that's open. I'm talking about the
Right.
section that is open.
Right.
I'm talking about the section that's closed.
No,
From a technical and regulatory perspective, Donna, you would be hard pressed to raise that road up above flood
I can't
elevation.
imagine being able to do that.
I don't think you
About
can
2 foot, you'd have to raise it.
At least, that's big.
Could we remind people to say their names before they speak for the record?
Thank you, Laura.
Dean Raynell. First, where are you guys planning on going from here? Are you gonna hold a public hearing and call it, let people that wanna come speak on all these issues? Is that your plan going forward, or? So I've got pages of questions on this survey. And I know there's a lot of people that aren't in this room tonight because they didn't feel it was gonna be a public forum to ask the questions.
That's okay. I'll take that as under advisement that it was probably a appropriate next step.
And I'll try to keep it brief. 2 comments that I need to bring up. The box culvert that we keep referring to, that needs to be replaced on Creek Road. The town of Middlebury had a grant in hand for that culvert, in 2015. Dan Werner talked to Public Works Committee into using that money somewhere else, because he didn't want to use it on Creek Road, knowing it was gonna be closed down. So the town has had grant money to replace that culvert before, and it went somewhere else. The other thing I haven't heard mentioned through all of this, along with a bunch of other scenarios that haven't been brought up, is your municipal general road permit. Now, there's a lot of talk about shutting the road down, throwing it up, downgrading it. The Vermont DEC, who runs your municipal general road permits, is publicly opposed towns downgrading their roads to get out of their obligations under the Clean Water Act. The town has till 2037 to bring these roads up to standards under the municipal general road permits. And I haven't heard that mentioned yet. To throw that road up, to get out of your duties under the permit is wrong. So that needs to be considered as well.
I do think that would be for a different, if we were to do it, it would be for a different reason other than what you're talking about. It would be because of the cost of repair and long-term maintenance costs, not for the clean water initiatives.
But you're required, that's a hydrologically connected segment of the road. That's a class 3 highway. You're required under the permit to address those issues.
Okay, we'll have to look at that.
I was gonna stand up. I'm Susan Shashak. I feel for all of you because I struggled with this for several years on infrastructure committee, and I just wanted to leave a couple thoughts with you as you think about what you want to do. My struggle with this was also knowing that I use this road recreationally, but as we did our studies on it, I grew to really appreciate the other people that use that road, either as a working landscape, as for agriculturally, or as a through road. And what I struggled with was my reluctance to sort of abandon access or only grant access to certain people in that area. I appreciate the work that you did because it gives much more real costs, and also we struggled a lot with repairing over long term. What would that look like? Excuse me, I'm so nervous. I shouldn't be. But I think one of the things that is missing for me in there was really highlighting the fact that the first two scenarios give access to everyone, whereas the second two scenarios only give access to 2 households. And that is what became very difficult for me. Sort of what, like Heather was talking about, of if we're gonna be fair to everyone, and also it became very difficult to think about just abandoning access to that area long term. So I feel for you. I'm sort of glad that I'm not on the front lines anymore, but I still care so much about it that I come and try and see and participate. And I feel for these guys. You know, everyone that lives on that road has struggled with this issue, and it's not so far different from in East Middlebury, where we're looking at our infrastructure and the river and how we're going to deal with that in the future. So I relate on that level as well. Thank you for your time.
And I see these numbers here, 600,000, 2 million, 4 million, almost 5 million. Is the money there? How are you gonna pay for it?
The money is not there. So
You're talking about these plans, and if the money isn't there, how are you gonna raise the money?
the option, if the town decided they wanted to spend, say, the 4.9 million, it would have to come in a bond form, which would be paid back over time by increased property taxes. It's probably more than just a select board decision when we talk about numbers like that. It's something that as Dean said previously, probably is worthy, not probably is worthy of inviting the entire town to voice their opinion.
The money's not in there ahead of time.
Hank,
If there was a road, that's for sure, you know, I mean, our property would be worth less if there's, you can't get in there really, only through the gate,
Your property taxes would be less.
maybe.
okay. Any other comments? So I think Kathleen, we've got to look at scheduling a public hearing on this at some point.
So we were suggesting that June 25th might give us enough time to do some outreach and notification of the meeting, if that works for the board.
So what are we doing a hearing on exactly? Are we just presenting the various options to the public and getting feedback?
It would be more to get feedback on what was presented this evening.
Yeah, I think presenting the options and some estimated costs and get the public's, provide an opportunity for those that are impacted by it, as including the townspeople. Well,
Are you talking about a select board meeting like this in a larger space? Because you're gonna need it. Or are we talking a state warned public meeting, hearing?
We could go to a larger venue.
yeah, there'd be a select board meeting where we'd have the public hearing as a part of it. And probably would be a good idea to look to have our select board meeting in a different venue where it would accommodate more people. So we can, that'll be part of the announcement. We'll have to find what's available for the 25th.
Yeah, because I think with what you see here and what you have here with, I mean, basically, you know, we've been involved in this for how many years? And the people show up and it's been different ones, but if you get the information out there, you're gonna have a lot more. And I'd like to be informed as to what kind of a presentation we can do as a public on this issue. So I think we're gonna need some time.
So perhaps I should work with Brian and Heather about the venue, the format, and the timing, taking that all in mind. It sounds like this could be longer than what we could incorporate into a regular select board meeting, giving it all of the attention that it
Yeah.
needs.
Okay, why don't we take that off to the side and we'll schedule it, issue the plan. Okay, thank you, Kathleen.
Yeah, I'm Mark Parra with Creek Road. One thing that concerns me is, first of all, this is very difficult, I agree. And I find myself in a position where I'm sort of sitting on the fence because I love Creek Road as well, and I want people to enjoy it, but I also want to be able to get to my house. And one of the things that concerns me is the rate of deterioration of the road that has escalated. And if it continues the way it has since 2012, I'm fearful that we may lose a portion of that road, and then we can't get emergency vehicles in, can't get fuel trucks in, we can't operate the farm, we can't operate my wife's business that operates out of the farm as well. And so time, you know, we're doing our due diligence, I believe, as a town, through the work that you folks are doing and folks have done and some of the committee work. And but let's be mindful of the fact that the pace of deterioration has increased quite a bit over the last 6 years. Thanks.
Okay, so if you're not on our mailing list and this will be announced not only in the Addison Independent, but we have a mailing list. So if they put their email over here, does it get onto our mailing list automatically, Kathleen?
Yes.
An email list
So,
rather than like
yeah.
a snail mail list.
Yeah, I'm sorry, to clarify, our email list And so you will be notified then of when it's scheduled and the location, so. Thank you, Peter.
If I could, just briefly?
Yes.
Some of my takeaways from this discussion, I would like to talk with you, Heather, about the numbers that you've laid out. I also will go back through the Shard Villa plans, compare that with the Pathways approach, and just confirm that number is accurate. I think as I illustrated with the $150 per foot from Pathways cost estimate versus the $480, there is still a dramatic difference in the alternatives. Are there other takeaways that the board would like me to look at in advance of the meeting so I can address questions if they come up at the next meeting?
I don't know. I know that the costs since 2015, 16 have, I mean, trying to build the same building that I built in 2016, and the cost is more than half again what it cost back then. And so I think we might be disappointed and surprised at what we would get for bids. So. I think there is a reality that the costs are gone crazy right now.
I'm also thinking that even if we did the first option, with everything, we'd still have flooding events, we'd still have access issues. I mean, we'd reduce them, but we'd still have to deal with them, and we know that. And so do other areas of Middlebury, and we deal with them as seasonal events.
This at least gets us started on a path of comparison, Peter, and I think we're a step forward. We still have a long way to go, obviously, but we needed to have it laid out so we could at least have a basis for comparison, and we appreciate the work you've done so far.
Okay.
And we will enlist your support when we do a public hearing.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'm gonna move to item number 8 on our agenda, which is an update on recently passed legislation regarding the single-use products and discussion of the status of our ad hoc plastic bag ordinance committee. And that's going to you, Victor, if you could cover that for us, if you're prepared.
Okay, well, thank you. As you know, the legislature passed a bill, and I believe either the governor is going to sign it, or you can't hear me? Okay, sorry. Either the governor is going to sign it, or he'll allow it to become law, that basically will ban the use of single-use plastic carry-out bags. It does more than that. The question is, since it's the function of the, and also this bill would preempt any ordinance that the town might pass. So in other words, anything that we might do would be nullified by the bill. So the question is, what should we do? And it's, I think, the task of the Selectboard to direct this committee. In other words, you gave us the charge. The charge was to design an ordinance. Now the state has preempted that task, so the question is, what does the Selectboard choose for the committee to do? And I'm really asking for the advice of the Selectboard. Whether, I mean, I suppose you have various options. You can say, we'll go out and do something in the spirit of I mean, we obviously have an environmental crisis, and we could go further in other directions, although it would have to be directions that wouldn't be preempted by this bill. In other words, we would have to do something different from this. But it seems to me, given that fact, rather than have the committee meet, that I'm asking the select board to consider, if the committee were to meet, what should it do? Or should the committee meet at all? And that's, I suppose, the question that I'm posing.
So thoughts of the board? Laura?
I think that's a good question. I think that the committee should meet. I think that it could definitely review the bill and see if it wants to strengthen it. That would be one thing. Or it could see if it wants to educate. I mean, because part of the purpose of the committee was to really do the public engagement and education on the bill. So even if it doesn't enlarge the bill or expand it, well, it could.
It would have to expand in other directions from what the state statute specifies.
I'm sorry, I can't.
It can't weaken it, but I understood that it could strengthen it if it
No,
wanted to.
no,
It can't.
preempts
Okay.
anything
It preempts
the
that.
town
Okay.
were to do.
Okay. All right. So.
So the question is,
Well, it could engage in the education and outreach that might be needed to bring businesses along. I mean, we talked about the value of that.
do you have any suggestions of, I mean, I'd like to know what you mean by that.
It's sort of like doing what the Addison County Solid Waste Management District does in terms of bringing people along on all of the recycling law that's just been passed. So it could be equivalent to something like that.
It would be.
It could be a series of
It would be
public
creating a new
meetings.
committee to do a different
Mhm.
task.
It would.
Yeah, I think.
It could
So
be.
It may very well be that
It's-
this committee was charged
Mhm.
to do something. And I'm asking the select board, since the committee cannot do what it's been tasked to do,
Yeah.
whether it wants to give it another charge. It would have to be something different. In other words, you're not going to go out and create an ordinance that would be preempted by the state. That seems to me a waste of everyone's time. And why don't you please come up? I mean, if you.
Amy McInich. My suggestion on this dilemma is to wait and see if the governor signs it, and if the legislature can override his veto if he doesn't sign it. We don't know yet what the governor is going to do on it. We're all waiting to see. And maybe just holding out another 3 weeks or so to see if it gets signed or not. I like the idea of meeting anyway, as we're waiting, and thinking through the possibilities of the work that could be done by this task force and reporting back to the select board. But I also see no issue with just kind of procrastinating and seeing what happens on this.
I guess what my point is that I think the governor has indicated he would not veto it. And even if he doesn't sign it, it becomes law. When a bill passes the legislature, both houses of the legislature, it goes to the governor. The governor can sign it, he can veto it, or he can simply allow it to become law. And but I mean, obviously, there's still, I suppose, a possibility, although I think it's an unlikely one. My point is, the purpose of, let's say, committees of the select board really don't figure out what their own charge is. It's the task of the select board to charge a committee. And I think that's a very important point. I mean, that's what we're elected to do.
So,
And
can I help frame this just a little bit, maybe? So Victor's making a very good point. You know, this is a term we use in the military, is mission creep, and we especially don't want to set the standard where we establish a committee, give it a charge, and then because that charge gets accomplished through some other means, allow them to find something else to do, and that's mission creep. And so I think that we as a select board have an obligation to either say that we're satisfied by what the state statute has done. I think it goes beyond what the voters asked us to accomplish. And so I don't think that trying to enlarge that is really what the voters asked us to do. I think that it's probably prudent to see how this works. And so we have an obligation then to either say we've accomplished what we wanted and we're okay, or to use that committee that we have created to maybe charge them with the education and a thoughtful process that the town of Middlebury can help our businesses institute the bans in a productive way that makes us compliant quicker, and our merchants able to contain their costs and be competitive and different things like that. And I think we need to have our discussion along those two lines, and not enlargement, not the committee deciding what. I do think it's the nature of our government that we, as a select board, either need to charge you with something new or disband you. I think that's our two options, personally.
So I have a suggestion. If this is the case, why don't we form a group outside the town government and go on an education mission with the store owners, and so we can counsel them. We can educate the consumers about the plastic bags. It doesn't have to be from the select board, but we can do it on our own, right?
Okay.
I mean, my point is, it's not really accomplished yet until,
Till it's law.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's almost certain, though, in the law, right?
Yeah.
Victoria?
As of last Thursday, when Governor Scott was interviewed on the radio,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Governor Scott last Thursday on the radio was interviewed, and he said that he supported the bill, but when he learned that the 10-cent charge on paper bags was mandatory rather than optional, he began to hesitate. And so I see it as a possibility that he would not sign the law. But we don't know. I hope he will go ahead with it. But so I think your committee should certainly at least wait until you know whether the governor is signing it or allowing it to become law.
Okay.
But he was hesitating. I think when Chris Bray was here with the other legislators talking to you, he said certainly that the state law was not meant to limit what towns could do individually, and that if we wanted to add on to that bill, that was certainly something to be considered.
Well, I think the bill does preempt, however, anything that we would do. However, if there's no law, then the committee's task could go on. So I suppose what Amy is saying, well, let's wait until we know absolutely and that there is a law.
So is the board good with holding off until the time when either Governor Scott signs the bill or July 1 when it passes into law anyways, to make a decision to, I do feel that the voters did not task us. This goes beyond what we even thought we might want to add to our own our own ordinance, and so I would be really opposed to adding stuff in until we see how these initial steps go. I think.
I understand where you're going with that, and I think that what Farhad is saying, and I think what I'm trying to say is that there's nothing to keep this group of people that we've already selected from doing their work now on preparing our community for this eventual law, which let's hope that that happens. I mean, they can continue to just do the education outreach. Now, it could be outside of the select board in terms of an appointed committee. I think we did a good job in convening who they would be. So we could say it's not going to be an official select board committee, but that doesn't mean there isn't a committee that works on this and does that work and advises us and reports to us. You can have our blessing and go forward and do that. I think that would be a way that we could go.
I guess I'm somewhat disagreeing here because I don't see what the harm would be in the committee meeting other than their time, but it's all people who have volunteered their time to do this. They're going to come with a recommendation that we either accept or don't. Their recommendation might be to disband their committee because the work has been done at the state level. On the very slim chance that this doesn't pass, then they're already getting going. And if nothing else, we have a committed group of people who then have reviewed the law carefully, understand it, and are ready to communicate that officially in some capacity to the rest of the town. I just don't see what the harm is in letting them meet. I don't understand why we're trying to stop them from meeting or delay a meeting, other than, it's people's time, but everybody who's on this committee signed up for that. So I guess I don't see what the harm is in just allowing them to proceed as they would have regardless and see what comes of it. It's just a recommendation. And I actually also disagree with this idea that that committees don't change their charge. That's true to a significant extent. But for example, the Economic Health Committee came to us in the beginning and slightly changed what their charge was, but they came to the select board and asked that their charge be changed. Yep. So I think if the committee is allowed to meet and they come up with a viable option that could benefit the town, then they've gone ahead and done that work ahead of time, and we're not delaying things. So I would say just let them do what they were going to do anyway, and we'll see what they come back with.
Well, I guess we disagree. In other words, I would much prefer knowing exactly what the task of the committee is before the committee meets. I think that's the responsibility of the select board when it creates committees. I think there is in other words, it gave this committee a specific task. And now it appears that task will not be possible to carry out.
I guess I'm not suggesting that they now have an open-ended, that the committee now has an open-ended, idea of what they're going to do. I think their task from us is still the same, but I think there's no harm in letting them meet. I don't see how this is going to be harmful in any way.
I don't think anybody's saying it's harmful. I think the question is it wasteful of people's time? And I'm particularly in tune with that as we talk about the number of committees we have and the number of meetings. And if the charge of that committee is already accomplished, what's the purpose of the meeting? A meeting should have a purpose. And if you don't have a purpose other than people who have a like-minded interest to get together, that's what a coffee shop's for. It's not an official public meeting. And so I would be personally in favor of just suspending the committee until such time as we know, and then we could have a discussion. I think the committee is ideally suited to be our lead education functional group that can come forth with ideas, ways that we can to do outreach and stuff, but that's a different charge. That's not what we charge that committee with. And so I would disagree that it's appropriate to have a town committee meet with no charge.
I'm not suggesting that. They have a charge. This is not a law yet. I guess I'm just saying, I don't see the harm in them going forward with the understanding that their charge is the same. And if they want to change the charge in any way, they need to come to us for approval.
But you're asking it to do something hypothetical. Suppose the bill doesn't become law. I think it's virtually certain that it will become law. If there is a doubt on this matter, it seems to me that, both houses of the legislature have signed off on this. And yes, perhaps the governor, although I had been to understand that he, if he didn't sign it, he would simply let it pass. So it seems to me that you're asking a committee to meet and do something hypothetical, and I just don't see that makes much sense. We don't normally create committees for that purpose. What if the bill didn't pass? If the bill doesn't pass, then it seems to me the committee has a function to carry out, a task to carry out. That's certain also, it seems to me.
We do have the statute
It should be,
that it's in our,
Our packet.
should be,
We have highlights.
yeah.
I thought we had the whole bill, but I'm sorry. I have it here somewhere, but
Amy, your thought was to just suspend the committee until we know what goes on with the state statute, or what was your thought on?
Well, I feel strongly that the committee should not be disbanded or until we know for sure what's going on
Yeah.
with this law. But I can't think off the top of my head, I don't recall what the exact charge was to the Ad-Hoc committee, and I don't remember if there,
It was to draft an ordinance.
it was drafting ordinance, was it, but there was no education or community?
no.
Not necessarily.
engagement with the community?
Well, the way you would get to the ordinance is by doing engagement with the community. That was the charge.
Sure.
Mhm.
I just think it would be a mistake to assume that this is gonna absolutely 100% sail through, and
I agree with you there, and I agree with you that personally, I would rather not disband the committee. I would rather change its charge, but not until we know exactly what we have. Because I think that there will be work to be done to prepare our community. And to make sure that we are being proactive in the tasks that the voters asked us to support. And so I think there are things we can do. It's just early. It comes into, if it goes into law, then it's July 1st, 2021. So we have a year. If we suspend until we know whether it goes into law, then we have a year of education and kind of a soft soft opening, so to speak, in that we can, will be merchants who will start doing it right away, I'm sure.
Well, I think, a great many are, and, I mean, it does, obviously, there's a larger question. I've said before that it seems to me this is the tip of the iceberg, and just the use of plastics has become vast, and there are environmental issues here that I think every town should address. I'm not saying that these are not important issues. But then I think it's up to the select board to say, we want you to do this, and that's my point.
I think I don't see how the outcome, if we suspend for 3 weeks or not, will be any different in the end than if we let the committee meet. I don't see how we're changing anything.
But we're not changing anything. The fact is that you're asking the committee to create an ordinance that wouldn't become an ordinance if the bill becomes law.
Yes, but we knew that when we formed the committee. We knew there was a high likelihood that this,
Well,
that this
we weren't.
passed. We're one more step in that direction,
We weren't
but we
sure
knew
that
that when we formed the committee.
the law preempts anything we do.
We thought that they were headed that way, but there was desire to ensure that we had the committee in place should that not occur. And that we sought, so that we were making steps towards that. We sought the participants.
But how is that different than now? We're in the same place where we
Now we actually have a agreed statute by both chambers of our state legislature.
That is not yet a law, so we're one more step in that direction.
Seems like we're wasting people's time to me. I don't have time to waste, and I think we're asking a committee to spend time on a ordinance that has a less likelihood of needing to be used than we had thought a few weeks ago, because there was some disagreements over how, between the two chambers, what was going to be accepted. And they were able to, unlike what they did in some of the other things, that everybody thought that minimum wage would get through, and it didn't. And that's what we were preparing for, is if there was if they came to loggerheads and could not agree on the language. They did agree, and it came out of both chambers.
Can I make a suggestion? So, I think at this point, given everybody's comments and suggestions, that I would encourage the members of the committee to meet privately and on their own time, at their own, and decide whether they want, given the current situation, whether they'd like to continue on the committee and what they think the charge might be. And then we'll wait and see in 3 weeks or so what happens. But at least they've talked amongst themselves whether they would continue or not, and what the charge might, what they would suggest the charge might be or not, so they could provide some. And maybe it's not okay for them to meet privately. Anyway, I don't think it would be a waste of their time to give the select board some guidance on whether the committee should continue, if the members are interested in continuing, and what they think their continued charge would be. So whether it's done in private, whether it's done in public, I don't want to suggest something that's wrong, but I think there's some advantage in them deciding those things and advising us once we know for certain what the course is.
And I think that's all I'm
That's all I was saying too.
Is
Yeah.
allow them to meet, and the only difference with
But
it.
then, what you're asking the committee to do is to consider what they might do if the bill becomes law.
And if they would still be interested, because you're asking then for a longer-term commitment than writing the ordinance.
I think that, in other words, you're changing, and I'm asking the select board, you're changing the charge of the committee by doing that. That's all.
Which is,
And no, you're saying, look, there's a possibility, a very good possibility, it's perhaps a virtual certainty, that the bill is going to become law. Do you have any suggestions as to what this committee might do beyond that? And then come back to the select board and say, yeah, we have these ideas. But what I'm asking is that the select board then modify the charge to the committee to do that.
that is what I'm saying.
That's what, it seems to me, is at issue. I'm very much jealous of the select board's prerogative. It's our duty, not simply to send a committee off and say, committees don't define their charges, the select board does.
Yes.
Okay.
I wasn't thinking that they should define it, I was thinking that they should make recommendations on, you know, maybe none of the people who signed up for that committee are interested in continuing if the state's created, because their purpose was an ordinance.
Right.
So if they aren't creating an ordinance, then maybe they have no interest, and that would be good to know, right? And if they are still interested, what interest do they have in pursuing if it does become law, I guess was, and maybe there's none, and they can make recommendations to us, that's what the infrastructure committee does all the time. We say, this is what we're recommending to you,
Right.
and obviously the select board can say, we don't accept your recommendation.
No, I realize,
So-
but I'm simply asking that if you're suggesting, I mean, the infrastructure is different from this because this committee had a specific task. And now I'm saying, all right.
I guess, so let's try to move this ahead, which
Yes,
is all
I'd
I
be
was trying
delighted.
to do. Maybe rather than suggesting a meeting, maybe each member of the committee could email Kathleen and just say, if the ordinance becomes law, I'm no longer interested, or I am interested, just so we knew. And then if they had suggestions on whether the committee should continue and what if the answer is yes. I don't want to burden Kath, I just trying to collect some information on whether there is something additional for the committee to do or not. And for me, having some input from those people assigned to the committee would be really helpful.
Okay.
And if they're not gonna meet, maybe they could just email it in to Kathleen. Because at some point, the next step, when we know, is whether to disband the committee or give it another charge. And right now, I don't know if I would give it another charge or not, because I don't know what the options are, so I was hoping the committee might provide us a little bit of input on what they think maybe. And maybe their answer is, they don't have a suggestion.
I'd also like to make a suggestion, because I think that nobody knows who has the authority to convene this meeting, and determine when, and that's a challenge.
That's Victor.
That's Victor.
That's Victor.
It is?
Yeah,
Oh,
Chair of the
okay.
committee.
All right.
So we're spending a lot of time, we're killing a lot of time on just a procedural thing.
Well,
And I don't know if I have the authority as the chair of the select board, but I'm not gonna spend all night sitting here beating this around.
Right.
I'd like to suspend the committee for 3 weeks, and by then we'll know whether it has a charge still to draft an ordinance. And I'd like to hear from the committee members if they are still interested in serving on the committee, if the charge is changed to one of functional outreach and education, and leading that effort. Okay?
So they communicate with you.
They can send an email to me, or actually it should go to Victor as the chair of the committee.
Okay.
And so I'm going to move on to number 9 here.
Thank you.
Grant agreement for downtown transportation fund grant for parking lot, sidewalk, and other amenities. Kathleen?
So, as announced last time, the town was successful in its grant application for $100,000 for the passenger rail platform for amenities associated with the passenger rail platform on Middle Seymour Street. So, a $100,000 grant agreement is in the packet for your review, and we are asking for your approval to go ahead and sign that.
Pleasure of the board.
I'll move to authorize Town Manager Kathleen Ramsey to sign the grant agreement for the Downtown Transportation Fund grant for the construction of the parking lot and related amenities for the passenger rail platform to be constructed on Middle Seymour Street.
Second.
Any questions or comments on that? Okay, hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Grant application for Walter Surf Community Fund.
Yes, with your authorization, I would like to submit a grant application for expenses associated with hosting Gravity, the elephant sculpture in front of the town offices in Middlebury, until April 2020, with a series, or at least a couple of workshops and meetings with the artist and that type of thing, along with some signage to go with the display. The grant application would be up to $5,000, and there wouldn't be any local match required by the town, except for any time and effort that I put into the promotion.
So my move to endorse the town's grant application to the Walter, how do you say that correctly? Surf. Community Fund for up to $5,000 for events, workshops, and other expenses associated with the public display of Gravity.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Approval of the check warrants.
I've reviewed them, and I move that we approve the total expenditures in the amount of $754,758.09, consisting of $657,196.08 in accounts payable and the rest in payroll for the period from May 15th through the 28th.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Aye. Town managers report.
I'll give a brief town manager's report. Just a couple of things coming up on your horizon. Vermont Gas's request for an easement for the Goodrich Renewable Gas, natural gas project. Vermont Gas will be seeking the board's approval of an easement across the Goodrich, formerly Sealy Farm property, which is subject to a VHCB malt and Town of Middlebury conservation easement. There's a description of the easement, a site plan in your packet. Malt will be considering Vermont Gas's request at their upcoming meeting on June 18th, and the Selectboard will consider the request at its June 25th meeting if the request is granted by Malt. Update on traffic signal paving loops. Director of Operations Bill Kernan's update on broken pavement loops for traffic signals is included in your packet. Kernan is currently soliciting quotes on the cost of replacing the broken loops with the radar presence detectors at the Academy Street, Mary Hogan, and Elm Street intersections. That will be coming up to you sooner rather than later. We're currently looking to see if there's money in other capital funds that could be used for this expense. DM Means Woods' 50th anniversary is this year, and the DM Woods trustees are seeking information, memories, and stories about DM Means from anyone in the community who knew him, as we look to mark this milestone occasion. Cindy Hill, I have her contact information, is collecting these thoughts and memories. And then finally, MCTV has put together a fun time-lapse video of Eben Markowski and his team assembling Gravity on the town offices plaza on April 13th. We'll plan to share the video with the community in the days ahead on the Town of Middlebury's website and through various social media channels. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Kathleen. Any questions of Kathleen? Okay, next, board member concerns. Laura?
I was very impressed with Chief Hanley's remarks at the Memorial Day service, reminding us of the true intent of that day, to honor those that have died in service. So I really appreciated his well-spoken remarks and just wanted to thank him for that. And I also wanted to share with you that Mary Hogan School won the Way to Go School Challenge, and as a result became eligible for the All-Earth Solar Power Flower. So it's getting a solar project. And there will be a public ceremony on June 5th that I will attend on behalf of Mary Hogan to be recognized as a leader in that challenge and the winner of that. And it's coupled with a mobility party kind of thing where they'll be displaying electric buses and other electric vehicles and other green transportation options. So it'll be an opportunity to be informed of some new technologies as well. So I just wanted to let you know about that. The solar power flower location could be a discussion between the town of Middlebury and Mary Hogan School. It could be that the size of that particular thing is better in offsetting something like, say, the warming hut or the teen center. So I would say stay posted, that it might be that it's something that benefits the town if the Mary Hogan or ID4 district decides that that's how they want to use that gift. So that could happen. I just wanted to mention that possibility. Okay, that's it.
Okay. Yeah. That's pretty cool. Victor?
I so recently was reviewing some information on the Federal Motor Carriers website, and they have a new Our Roads, Our Safety campaign, and they have some great infographics on sharing the road with trucks and tips for passenger cars, bikers, and bicyclists, pedestrians, motor vehicles, on how to share the road with commercial vehicles. Things about stopping distance, blind spots, turning radiuses, and there's some good information. I'm not sure how to best to share it with the community. I know Laura's great about providing us information for biking and walking in the town, but I kind of hoped to support the commercial drivers on the road and share some information that would help make their lives a little easier. So maybe I'll just reach out to Kathleen and ask her. Okay.
That's good.
So there's information out there that's helpful. If anyone's interested, I can point them in the right direction.
Is that something, excerpts can be put onto the website or something?
Yeah, there's downloadable graphics. There's actually they've provided social media links that you can share. There's quite a bit of information. So anyway.
Okay, thank you. Lindsay?
I was just gonna say, now that I've gotten used to the new format for the agenda, I really like it, and I think it's very clear, and so I just wanted to give kudos to Chris for doing that. It's looking really, really nice.
Here, here. Progress. All right. Farhad?
It's good to be home.
Yay.
Nice to have you back.
Thank you, everybody, for your kind words of support for us. I also got a letter from the town office from all the staff, it means a lot to have all the support. And from what I hear from my wife, there were like hundreds of people stop by at the store offering their support, and it really, really makes you feel like you belong here when you hear these kind of things. So that's why I said I'm home now, because I consider this as my home, as my family. Thank you.
Oh, nice. So we have a need for executive session on discussion of contract or agreement. And so if, could you lead us into?
Sure. In accordance with Vermont's open meeting law requirements, I move that the board find that premature general knowledge of the consideration of contracts and pending litigation would clearly place the select board at a substantial disadvantage because the select board risks disclosing its litigation strategy if it discusses the contracts and pending litigation in public.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, those opposed?
I further move that the board enter into executive session to discuss contracts and pending litigation and under the provisions of Title I, Section 313A1 of the Vermont statutes.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, those opposed? 8:51, move into executive session.